I was younger at that time. So dealing with it as an adult, and had started a new job, I I was so preoccupied, and I was like, well, is this? I was like, what is this? Because I had come to realize that I had some people that told me, they're like, well, how did you not know? How come you didn't see that? Well, when you're busy and you're a mom and you're at a new job, you're not babysitting a grown adult.
Yeah.
And I had come to realize that I had found like hidden bottles. And I was like, if you're hiding things from, I thought to myself, I said, is he hiding them from himself, or are you hiding them from me?
Welcome to the Ranya Show. I'm your host, Ranya, and each week we have a story to share with you, whether it's mine or our guests. Tune in as we discuss trauma, manifestation, and everything in between. Today's episode, we have Ann Marie with us. Ann Marie has gone through some things in her life that she's going to share with us today. There have been moments that have shaped her and made her into who she is today and got her to this present moment. To be able to share that story with us is incredible. So thank you for being here today, Ann Marie. And I guess my first question would be for you is, when do you feel like the pattern of what you're sharing with us today started?
Um, that pattern, I realized that when I was opening my eyes to of dealing with an ex of mine, that I had realized that he was a pure representation of the man that raised me.
Okay.
And it was interesting because I came to realize that, oh my God,
Okay.
that the person that I was trying to run away from is the person that I allowed into my home.
Okay. And when was that realization that you were living with someone that was a representation to who your, can we just call him father?
Yeah, we can. It was when I realized that he was a closeted alcoholic. Um, I, I mean, I have never really dealt with anything
Hmm.
like that hands on. I mean, the person that raised me, he has passed since then, but um, I was younger at that time, so dealing with it as an adult, and had started a new job. I I was so preoccupied, and I was like, well, is this? I was like, what is this? Because I had come to realize that I had some people that told me, they're like, well, how did you not know? How come you didn't see that? Well, when you're busy and you're a mom and you're at a new job, you're not babysitting a grown adult.
Yeah.
And I had come to realize that I had found like hidden bottles. And I was like, if you're hiding things from, I thought to myself, I said, is he hiding them from himself, or are you hiding them from me?
Hmm.
And I just got to that point that I had a realization that things were just not going to get better. And I asked myself, I was like, why am I staying? Like, what am I doing?
Hmm.
And then I just packed up, and, I left. And that at that point, that's when I realized, what I had allowed, my physical abuser, when I was from childhood, come into my life into a different adult form. And that's when I realized that I had to heal from that, in order for me to go ahead and make better, smarter choices. Because I had realized what I was running from, I never healed.
Hmm.
And I was still attracting that
Yeah.
because of the fact that I never addressed it.
Okay. And for, because I know a little bit about your story because we've spoken
Mhm.
before, but for our viewers and listeners who are just tuning in to listen to your story, um, what you went through was, and it's not for me to label it because it was your
Mhm.
experience. So how would you label it as to what you went through, what had happened, and then we can see like how that connects to like your childhood and like, like you said, your
Mhm.
person is supposed to be your father and take care of you and support you and protect you was actually the one that was causing you the pain and the suffering.
Yeah, I mean, I did, as I began my own healing journey, I also came to realize that, having known his story from when he was a child,
Hmm.
he was abused by his own family.
Hmm.
He was, I think, an addict, a drug addict, I think at the age of like 14, and he was the black sheep of the family. And I knew that and I felt, and that's where I came to realize that I couldn't hate him anymore
Hmm.
because of the fact that I was like, wow, I said, this man didn't have, it's like his parents and his family abused him, like his siblings didn't want to get the brunt of it. So they kind of like egged on the parents. So I was like, I can't even imagine what it would have been like as a child I mean, again, I know he had left, I think, when he was 14, 15 years old, of how that was of having your own parents, your own mother not protecting you, and then having your siblings against you. I knew that that was a lot of mental, I can't even imagine that. I mean, even though I had kind of lived it, as like a younger child myself, but to have like that blood, you know, being that way. Um, so I definitely learned how to forgive him with that aspect, being a mom myself.
Hmm.
And I think getting me on my journey again was once I came to realize that I didn't want to have that life. It was much more, I would say, I will say it was more mental, verbal abuse. And then I had something had just shown me that, what, I was like, this is going to get bad, and I knew it was going to get physical. So that's what's made me make that choice. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I realized that I was like, I didn't want to do that anymore because I wasn't gaining anything else. And I was like, I don't want my life to be like this. I kind of envisioned my kids, trying to run away, as they became adults, young, as they were going to become young adults. And I was
Yeah.
like, is this what I'm going to do? I'm going to be stuck with this individual. And I came to realize that that person, again, like my stepfather, it was the same situation. His father was an alcoholic, and he was doing it. And then that's when I told him, I said, I just don't want to do this anymore. He didn't take that lightly. Um, but, and I was like, wow, he was like, oh, I'll do this. I'm going to stop for you. I was like, you can't stop for me. You have to stop for yourself. That's when I realized I was like, I said, if you didn't stop for yourself or for your daughter or for all of her kids that she's had, he just continued, and I just didn't want to hear it anymore. And I just realized that I deserved better.
Hmm.
I knew I had to focus on myself, to make sure that I didn't continue that pattern as well.
Okay. And what age would you say that like that realization that it's time to walk away and it's time to just, try and change the cycle from that abuse that you were just like, this, I'm done.
Oh, that happened, I would say about like 5 years ago.
Mm.
So, I mean, and I did see when I looked back and I looked at a prior ex of mine, he wasn't a physical abuse. It was
Yeah.
more of control.
Okay.
That was 100%. That was a very long-term relationship. That was all about control of like where I was going, and I didn't think anything of it as a 20 something year old. I didn't think anything of that. I didn't pay mind to that. I figured, oh, he was concerned of where, let me know when you're getting there. Let me know, where you're going to be at. But I didn't. And then it was like all of a sudden, if I change, I altered my schedule for some reason. If like for work, if I had to go to a class, for a new training, which was very rare. It was like, where are you going to be at? Well, what's this? And then all of a sudden, on my way back to my office, he would show up.
Mm.
But again, I didn't realize that portion until I dealt with what I dealt with about the 5 years ago. So that's when I began kind of putting pieces together of my childhood, of that pattern.
And like
looking back at everything that you went through and like, staying, first it was your dad, then it was your stepdad, then it
Mhm,
was relationships with your exes.
mhm.
What did you tell yourself? What did you convince yourself to continue staying in those relationships?
That was a part of me that actually deals back to my dad, me dealing specifically with my dad, because I didn't meet him until I was like 14.
Mm,
Um, that was much more abandonment issues. That was because he wasn't there, he wasn't present. I had told myself, I was like, if I'm good enough, if I'm quiet enough, if I do everything that I'm supposed to, you know, that'll, you know, that'll make them happy. It was that aspect. I remember, I mean, again, I think I was more of the pleasing. I was a pleaser, definitely a pleaser person, even with
hmm
my grades and everything. But with that, I figured if I love him hard enough, he'll stop. If I show him that I care, he'll stop. But that's when I was like, it has nothing to do with him. That had to do everything with myself.
Yeah.
And again, even with looking back to my biological father, I had come to realize that he made his own decisions with his life. And those are the things that he's going to have to live with for the rest of his life, of his absence. We don't have the best of relationships, even though we try. um I came to realize, I'll give you what you give to me. And I just don't try to put that much more effort than what I'm getting as well. I remember still doing that with him, and I was like, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I told him, I said, these are my boundaries. This is what it is. If you don't like it, then, that's it. I was like, we don't need to talk.
Mm. And when those moments were happening where, you told yourself, if I love them hard enough, if I, please them,
Mhm.
then they won't leave me or they won't continue to hurt me, but they continue to. What did you make it mean about yourself?
Well, I didn't think that they wouldn't leave me. I think it was more of me if I could make them happy. But
Mm,
that's when I realized it wasn't by me by me trying to make other people happy. I wasn't happy.
yeah.
That's where I lost myself. Um, Again, I mean, I could say I did everything right, but if somebody doesn't want to take accountability or see themselves, for their own flaws, or realize that, they have things that they have to fix for themselves, I was like, I can't, I got tired. I honestly, I just got tired of trying to pick up the pieces where I didn't, I didn't make the mess.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, what was it like when you finally made that choice to walk away and make yourself a priority and to place those boundaries in place and to do what's best for you? What did you find to be the most challenging part of it? And how was it, what was the reward? Basically, like, what was the most challenging part? But at the end of that challenge, there was this big reward of like where you are now. So, what was the challenge and what was the reward of walking away?
The challenge is mainly about facing that childhood, opening your eyes to a lot of the things that you didn't. They say, when you're healing, that's the darkest part, and that's when you have to do it by yourself.
Mm,
And I definitely did. I would say I isolated a lot more just because I really wanted to focus home in on myself. There were certain things that I wouldn't have done. I would say what I wouldn't have done just because of, oh, I didn't want to get, anybody upset. If I stood with like hanging around with my family too long, or if I went out to dinner, after work, and I realized that I kind of gained more of a life at that point. But I think again, it's more of that healing journey when you're by yourself. after, you've taken care of somebody, or again, as you're kind of people please everybody else, I was like, okay, now this is when I put everything into me, and growing up, the way I was raised, we were raised as, you're supposed to make sure your home is good. You're supposed to make sure, that everybody else is taken care of. You're not really, we were not taught to take care of ourselves. Like, on the plane, when they say, put the oxygen mask on yourself so that way you can help others. That was something that I was not taught growing up,
Yeah.
so to go ahead and to think of myself first, and that was the other thing. Like, that was for the first time I was literally thinking of myself. And I was like, for me to be the best version of me, I had to fix me in order to be able to be there for everybody else. And then I
Yeah.
also came to realize that not everybody is able to walk away from these situations. Like, there's been women that, have died, and that's why I wanted to end up telling my story, because not everybody else gets the chance, or not everybody else is able to walk away, and do it. I remember my first peaceful night, I slept on the floor on a mattress topper. I mean, I was sore the next morning, but I mean, to have that peace and that zen, that I didn't have to worry about what was on the other side of that door when I got home. I mean, there was many times that I would get home and the smell of like hot booze, if somebody was dead asleep, and then God forbid you disrupt them or they wake up, because you don't know what hell awaits for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Like, it's you're laughing about the mattress topper, but I'm sure that was like the first peaceful night you've gotten in years. Felt
Oh, yes.
safe to sleep on that mattress topper, even though you were sore the next day.
I mean, honestly, it was interesting. Like, again, I've had this conversation with many women. One woman told me after her divorce, she said, I was sleeping on blankets on the floor. She was like, but again, it was the same thing. She was like, I had so much peace. I mean, I didn't really know the details of her story when she got her divorce with her young boys, but and I was like, wow. And I thought of her at that moment. I was like, wow, I didn't care. I had no curtains on my windows. I had moved in the middle of a snowstorm.
Yeah.
But again, for that, I was like, wow, I was like, oh, this is it. I'm able to, again, for you to come home and not have to deal with, oh my God, you don't like, I realized, I was like, wow, like, there was a huge difference. Like, I saw so much peace, even from cleaning to bathroom schedules. it was a lot. And I was like, wow, I was like, I definitely was not living.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, you hear stories, and like you said, some of them don't make it out. Some of
Mhm.
them just continue to excuse the behavior out of fear. And it's like, it's also the conditioning, because it's like divorce is such a taboo, or
Mhm.
you know, airing your dirty laundry is such a
Yes.
taboo. And like, for people to know that, it's like, because then it's like, then you get the question of like, how didn't you see that he was such a piece of shit, or
Yes.
that he was abusive, like, you guys went out, or like you dated, or
Mhm.
how not tell just by the way he spoke to you, or, and it's like, people know how to act,
Yeah.
and like, catfish, and it's like that narcissistic manipulative behavior.
Well, I can also say for that aspect, I had actually spoken to one of his brothers, and
Mm,
his brother literally told me, because I had a family member said, how did you not see it? Like, and it makes you feel, you feel stupid. You kind of like sit there and you're like, why didn't I see this? But, for his own brother to say, I'm his brother and I didn't know. I thought his words were, I thought my brother just had a bad string of relationships. He goes, until the day that I saw, the day that I witnessed it, he was like, and that was the day I stopped talking to him. And
yeah,
that was also where I started, as I kind of like got closer with, like, I guess friends or whatever friends and family that he had, that's when I started realizing, I was like, you don't have a relationship really, with any of these people that you should, and that's when I also began to look at people like how, how they treated, the family members in their families, like how they spoke about their parents, how they spoke about even if they had children. I began to really look at that. I was like, if you don't have a good relationship even with your mother, I mean, again, everybody has their own relationship with their own parents.
Yeah.
But when I would hear him bash at them, but yet, you know, be okay to go to their home and to eat their food, I was like, that's a little weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's like the stories they tell you, like, oh, my ex was this and that. And
Mm-hmm.
then like down the line, you're like, wait a minute, was it the ex? Or was it you? And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's it's tough. And then like, for you, I'm sure you were just trying to be like the best mom that you could and the best
Mm-hmm.
wife. Like, what was it for you? Did it have an impact on you staying longer because you had kids? Like, was there something that you wanted for your kids that you thought if you stayed, they would get?
Um, I know for, again, because of how I was raised, you want to have that family,
Hmm.
and I had come to realize that, all my kids ever really needed was me, for me to try to provide, like a little, the typical ideal family. I was
Hmm.
like, maybe they didn't really need that in that aspect. Maybe they were fine with me. I mean, I know I may not know much about like sports and things like that, but, I that's where I came to realize that, again, I was just trying to like put myself in that category and stuff. And I was like, realistically, all my kids needed was for me to be okay in that
Yeah.
aspect.
Yeah. And I think it's also like you walking away and taking your kids, you actually gave them that safety because,
Hmm.
you know, just from your own experience growing up in that, you thought it was normal to have
Hmm.
a partner that was just like your dad because your dad's supposed to be the one that loves you
Hmm.
and keeps you safe. And if he was doing that, but he was still your dad, so that means like having a partner like that
Hmm.
is supportive. So, I commend you on walking away and doing that for your kids because you actually gave your kids that sense of safety, that sense of like
Hmm.
this is not an okay relationship. If
Yeah,
somebody like you this way, if somebody, that's not an okay person that you want to spend the rest of your life with.
exactly, exactly. And I just kind of like lost like a little bit of the train of the thought with that. But and it just kind of, I was like, and I kind of really took a step back and I was like, how would I feel if my kids were with somebody like this? And I even tried to talk a little bit more. And when you try to talk logic to an illogical person or somebody that's just in complete denial, it's very interesting. Like now I could sit back and think about those conversations. I'm like, because I remember he had said, he's like, oh, you just, he was like, you left the relationship because of your kid, you're because of your kid. And I was just like, well, yeah, I didn't want you to be around my kid. And that's what a good parent wants. They want, their kids to be around good people.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
you're not as good as what you think you are, and I mean, again, everybody has to deal and again, I knew he had been doing what he's been doing for more than more, he was addicted more than in his life than he wasn't. I mean, I think he started drinking like the age of like 17,
Oh, wow.
so I was like, this is all this is your coping mechanism,
Yeah.
and I just didn't, I deserve better than to have to like babysit
Yeah.
somebody, a grown person. It was like, I wanted to be able to come home, and I wanted my kids to be able to come home and not have to worry about that. And I had thought of, you know, when I was a kid, of how things were when I was going to come home and being fearful. And I was like, how did I get back to this place? And I was like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. Like I remember even during COVID, that's when I had dealt with it. And that's where I began to end it all, because I mean, it was hard to make any moves during COVID in the very beginning. But yeah, dealing with that, I think COVID definitely opened my eyes and allowed me to see a lot more. I was like,
Mm.
oh, so this is the true aspects of everything, and that was interesting to to go ahead and get that eye opening. Like, and again, you hear other people saying about how COVID was and how people were suffering during that time. So I definitely understood what they were talking about with that.
Yeah. And I think it's like with COVID, because when COVID didn't happen, like you weren't stuck with someone for
Hmm.
hours a day, 7 days a
Yeah.
week. Like you still had work. You still had like if
Hmm.
you like you weren't really sitting with what was in front of you. It was like
Exactly.
to be like in a bit of denial about what was
Hmm.
happening because you weren't surrounded by it for
Yes.
amount of time. Uh,
Hmm.
so yeah, I feel like, and I think it was like a statistic or something that came out about like people either had kids or got divorced during
Yes.
COVID because they
Yes.
were so much time together, and it was just
Hmm.
like, what the hell did I do? Or
Or
even
what
more,
was I thinking? Yeah.
and it's like, so it really was, I feel like, an eye opener for a lot of people. And then like, with you now that going through what you went through and getting out, and it's so sad to be like, so not everybody makes it out.
Hmm.
And like the toughest thing, because you just want, especially for women, like I saw this thing where it said, this woman was asked, what would you do if there were no men to protect you? And she was like, from who? And
Oh.
it really, it's just like, it really is like, when you think about it, it's like, who do we need protection from other than men? And then like you hear about, and it's not to say that like men don't go through things, because
Hmm.
there are stories over like men get abused, because they're
Yeah.
not going to hit their significant other or whatever it is,
Hmm.
and take advantage of that and they abuse them, and they go through things. Or like you said it yourself, like your biological father was abused by
Hmm.
his family growing
Hmm.
up, and or even your ex, like his own brother said, I didn't know what was happening. And I think like for your ex, the reason why he didn't realize the kind of person that he was because nobody knew what he was doing or like the problems that he had. So
Hmm.
when he would have conversations with them, they were like, oh, you're so great, and he
Hmm.
like would take that, you know what I mean? So it's
Hmm.
like he was having his blackouts or his binge drinking, he
Hmm.
wasn't thinking like, what the hell am I doing? It was like, oh, but my family tells me I'm so great, and everybody I talk to thinks I'm
Yeah.
amazing. So
Oh
this
yeah.
is not a problem.
Hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, again, it's not even to bash. It wasn't even to like. I'm not bashing at anybody, but I mean, again, it's we all go through things, and
Yeah.
that's why it was interesting. I had a conversation with him, in the very beginning, and I was like, well, and this is again just me being who I am. I was like, well, people, we all go through things in life. I was like, we all. It was something we were talking about, something about that, and he was like, that's right. It's like, now that I think about it, he was like, people have to kind of, you have to accept your childhood or accept, what was done for you, and move past that. So I thought, foolish me, that we were on the same page with that. But, and again, it was like, I didn't know, of the situation, or, everything that really entailed. That's why when I heard that family member say that to me, I was like, well, how, how could I? Again, you go into a relationship and you're not thinking that you have to like, you, you have to defend yourself. Honestly, I thought he was bipolar or schizophrenic. I was like, maybe he's on meds and I don't know. I mean, again, I try to give people, I'm such a fool. I give people the benefit of the doubt all the time.
Yeah.
And, I feel like that's shame on me.
No, I don't think it makes you like a fool or like shame on you. It's just like you vow, like your intention is to see the good in people and to give
Hmm.
them to be that version of themselves. But it's not for you to bring out that version of themselves out of them. Like you said
Hmm.
earlier, somebody unless they want to be helped. So if you wanted to be that version of himself that wasn't an alcoholic and wasn't, um, fighting these demons that, he just kept trying to fight them and then giving into them, that's not on you. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? The fact that you did have conversations with him, you did try to make it work, you did try to support him and help him, that's not on you, you know? And the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you realize that in order to help others, you need to help yourself first, and you started pouring into your own cup before you can start pouring into others, that's the best and most important thing that you can do for yourself
Mm-hmm.
and for the generations after you. And it also heals the generations before you because you're breaking that cycle. You know,
Yeah.
you're making a different choice. So you are
Mm-hmm.
creating new, you are creating a ripple effect. And, you know, you and I have spoken about this, and I know you said you wanted to share it, that you decided to write a book. So what was like,
Yeah.
what was that for you to be like, okay, this is what I went through. This is how I got out of it, because unfortunately, not everyone is able to walk away like you did. And there have been instances where women have tried to walk away, and it ended their life because of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like
Exactly.
they were stalked, or there's so many things, and it's so disheartening. And it's like, especially when like something happens to a woman and then they're like, oh well, what was she wearing, or how did she provoke him?
Yeah.
And it's
Mm-hmm.
like I saw this video, actually multiple videos of
Mm-hmm.
women with their dogs, and they had like a piece of steak, because you know, like dogs love, like, you know,
Yeah.
treats.
Mm-hmm.
Like my dog, you've met
Yeah.
Naya.
Yeah.
So, and they had like the steak just in front of the dog, or the
Mm-hmm.
treats, and they said no, and the dog just sat there, waited. When they said, okay, now you can have it. So if a dog, it's in their nature
Mm-hmm.
to like go for the prey or whatever it is, and they heard no and listened,
Mm-hmm.
what's the excuse from human beings?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. That was, yeah, that's, I like that. That's a perfect example of it. Because again, you can't, I mean, there were times that, again, when I said, I came home and, dead asleep, like passed out drunk. And again, the whole living room would smell of hot booze, that was raking off of him. And it was like, oh, you see? And it was like, I'd be doing my own thing, a few hours later, then he awakens and it was like, oh, you see, this is what you do. And I'm like, what did I do? And I remember several times in that time, I was like, what did I do? And I was like, I did absolutely nothing. The drinking happened way before I had gotten home, and you woke up that way,
And
and that's when I realized I was like, this has nothing to do with me, and again, I was like, I just got tired of it. I was like, great, what am I, and then I remember at one point, I think once he had admitted, and because I confronted him on it, and I was like, so what am I going to be getting when I go home today? Like, are you not going to drink? Just let me know. And I just, because I just didn't care anymore, and it was just like, I was just tired. And I realized it was interesting. Once I started really pouring into me, that's when I saw him like becoming unhinged and a little bit more unraveling more, as I continued to grow and flourish. And I was just like, I changed jobs. I was in the same hospital, just changed a different provider. I was happier,
yeah,
and then it's like, and I knew it felt like I was going up and then he was kind of going down. And I guess because everything I had poured into him, I was pouring into myself. And I
yeah,
was just like, I began really embracing a lot. That was, and I think once I began doing that, and once even, I started just again being around my family again, being around friends again, posting things, even though I really don't post much on Instagram or Facebook. Um, that kind of gave me the inspiration. And again, when I saw one of my cousins going through a hard time, and she was really, it was like this man had to break me in order for me to find me. And when I saw my cousin becoming a broken version of herself, just due to other things that was going on, we had that conversation. And I told her, I said, I said, we're so lucky. I was like, we're so lucky that we were able to get away, that we were able to walk away. And I remember her saying, yeah, but some people don't. She was like, I just don't know. She was so lost. And I was just like, that broke my heart. And I feel that if I can tell like my story to people, that it would definitely help them, even it's like to be the voice of those that didn't get to make it out, because if they got out of bed and they creaked the floor or they made a noise or a kid made a noise and they were protecting their child, it was to go ahead and help. It's not to say, and I don't want to say like I'm advocating for all women to leave these individuals and then these men like come hating, but it's like, just do the proper thing, do the right thing. It's like you can't keep breaking and bashing at somebody else, because then again, the cycle continues.
Yeah. I think it's also like a projection of who they are. So if they're projecting it onto you, it hurts them a little less, or it makes them feel like
They
they're
feel
not
better.
suffering.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't think it necessarily makes them feel better, because I do feel like at the end of the day, they're more guilty. And
Hmm.
I feel the guilt is the reaction to what they do and what they project, because they're like, no, 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 I'm not a bad person. There's nothing for me to take accountability for.
Hmm.
No, it's this person's fault. They provoked me, or they knew that I went through this and now they're using it against me,
Hmm.
or they need to change, but meanwhile they're the one changing. So because
Hmm.
they didn't have a problem with it when we first got together, but now all of a sudden it's a problem, they're the problem,
Hmm.
and it's just like that denial. And it's, rather than chipping away at their like comfort zone or whatever has helped them disassociate into continuing to do what they do,
Hmm.
it's, oh, no, 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 this is my space. You can't take it away from me. um I don't know what's going to happen. Like if I look in the mirror and I'm like, wow, things need to change, and it's that fear. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear on what's the other side. Sometimes
Hmm.
you have people that are afraid that if they face who they are, they might end their life
Yeah.
because they won't be able to handle the person that's looking back at them.
Hmm. Exactly. And I had remembered, I even had a conversation with him at one point. I was like, you don't know. I was like, 'cause again, he was informed that he could never drink again, that he was a blackout drunk. Like
Mm,
he did things, said things, like wouldn't, he never remembered anything. And so by a physician, they was told, he was like, you could never have a drink ever again, because that's how bad you are, and he was like, oh, I just want to know, what did I say? What did I do? And I was like, even if I told an ounceling of it, I don't want to hear anymore. I don't want to hear anymore. It was like, so that you don't want to hear anymore of, and I said, I was like, how would you like it if your daughter or your granddaughters dated somebody like you? I said, how would you like it if everything that you did, which you just barely know, I was like, how would you like it if it was happening to your own? I wouldn't like it at all. Okay, good. But again, and again, it was up to him to get the help. Again, my story is not about, it's not about anyone else. It's mainly about me, recognizing, the things that I had to work on for myself, and to learn to heal within myself,
yeah.
and to go ahead and just move forward.
Hmm. And where has moving forward and making changes and creating a new cycle led you?
That's where it gave me that idea for the book. And again, I already told you that I had worked on it before. I had several chapters, and then I don't know what happened to it. It disappeared. It deleted. So I've been working on trying to redo it again.
Okay.
and we had that discussion of hopefully, this will kind of crack open some other, like fill in any holes and blanks and anything like that. Because I had realized that what I was doing was I was trying to go back to what I had written, but now I was like, let me try to go at it at a different angle. Because again, it's like, how do you begin it? How do you start this? Like,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
you're also like trying to still protect him in telling your story versus just letting it all rip and flow and like, because I feel like a part of you is still trying to protect what you had in the sense of like, I don't know, like, was there any part of you that felt like if I tell the whole like raw, unfiltered story, that there might be backlash or anything at all, or like it might make it mean something about you?
no, no, no. I looked at it like that. If I said more, that it would give more light. Like, you know what I mean? I didn't want to give anybody credit for, like for my story. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't want us to say, he was like, oh, if it wasn't for me,
Yeah,
or some weird thing like that. I
yeah,
just didn't want to give anybody that kind of like, I don't want to say power,
yeah,
but I mean, I had like the other ex that I had, the where are you? What are you doing? Like, it was interesting. He had a God complex. And again, I realized that it was a lot of his, like, again, with him, it was his own childhood trauma. And I had told him, I said, this, right? This, I was being his doctor or whatnot, but he was like, you're never going to find anybody like me, or anything like that. And I was like, I didn't want to give them that light or that power to think that, oh, if it wasn't for me, I mean, again, it would be weird for them to say, if it wasn't for me being an alcoholic or being controlling, you wouldn't have a story. But I think
yeah,
it's more of that. It's like, I'm not trying to shelter them. It's more of the fact that I'm trying to put it back like towards myself.
yeah,
It's my
yeah,
story, not really theirs in that aspect.
yeah. And that's what I mean by that. It's like it's still in a way you're sheltering something of the sense of
Hmm.
like, okay, I want to tell my story. I want it to be all about me. And then
Hmm.
it's like, I don't want them to be like, I'm the only reason you have a best-selling book. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? But
exactly, exactly.
but it's still your story. It's your experience. You were
Hmm.
there. That was your perspective on things. That was your experience and what happened in the moment. So whether or not,
Hmm.
because of them, you have a book,
Yeah,
they inserted themselves into your book. Nobody told them to
yeah,
show up and act that.
exactly.
So,
Everybody has a chapter to play in our lives, and maybe they have a few more chapters than needed be.
yeah. But at the end of the day, it's like it's your experience, it's what you went through,
Hmm.
it was your perspective because you can come across and you have like, past relationships. Each one, yeah, it's labeled as like domestic abuse or it's labeled as alcoholism. There's so many different labels, but your experience, even though each one was labeled the same, your
Hmm.
experience, each one was different. Yes, there were
Hmm.
similar patterns, there were similar things, but each experience was different.
Hmm.
So it's like you said, like people come into your life, and it's like sometimes it's for a reason, which
Hmm.
now you have a reason to write a book,
Yeah.
and it's for a season, sometimes it's for a lifetime. But even if they're the same outer shell in a sense, the
Hmm.
same figure, of
Yeah.
your biological father through
Yeah.
many different relationships, each one teaches you something different about yourself. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
of
then
course.
and that's how you were able to walk away and you were able to get out because
Hmm.
you got to the point where you learned that no, I'm the priority. No, I'm the one who's gonna make a different choice because the choices I've made
Hmm.
before all led me down the same path.
Exactly. Exactly. And it was funny because I was told by one of my cousins, she said to me years ago, she was like, you have to remember that you're an individual first. You're not a mother, you're not a girlfriend, you're not a daughter first. She was like, you're you first. And again, that had stuck with me. And I had said that to an ex of mine. And he was like, well, I don't like that. I don't agree with that. He's like, but you're a mother, you're a mother. But it's like, again, it's like, I was like, well, now I know why he said that. But, again, it's like you as the individual, like again, you have to take care of yourself first in order to go forward. In order to go ahead and take care of everybody else, you have to, be okay first.
Yeah. Yeah. And, now having the experience that you went through and having all the lessons you've learned and the things that you were able to walk away with, what kind of ripple effect are you hoping to create and to expand on, to make a difference in other people's lives?
It's to make more awareness, and to have, so they don't hear that, or somebody not to say, how did you not know? I want, like, and again, that makes you, I know for me, it made me feel stupid.
Mm,
It's like, I don't want it. So, I don't want somebody to say, how did you not know? It's like, I want somebody to say, okay, so how can I help? How
yeah.
can we, how do you want to do this? It's
Yeah.
that, take that whole trying to put the blame on them, because again, they already have that guilt. They already feel like crap, after you've been bashed at, yelled at, pushed around, everything like that. You don't need that from somebody that you're seeking help from. It's mainly that. I know I'm still, I put everything out there, and I know not everybody else does. I'm very honest with how I am and who I am. And I think for me, that's something that I'm having to realize, that not everybody is like that. And that's why I think for me, that's something I'm still dealing with myself. Because again, I have to realize that maybe that was also, a contributing factor to things. Maybe because I feel that I'm so sincere and honest with people, that not everybody else is going to be like that as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's accepting the fact that not everyone is like you and not everyone thinks or acts like you, even if they went through the same circumstances that you went through. Um, Everybody has their own experience and everybody has their own way of coping with their experiences. And for some, it's
Mhm.
denial. For some, it's disassociating. For some, it's fighting. For some, it's just surviving. Um, and it's like, you could sit there and you could be like, oh, well, I would have, and I would have walked away, or I would have seen through those red flags from the first day. And it's like, you, good for you. But it doesn't mean, you know what I mean? It's like,
Mhm.
some you can even tell yourself that, like, I'm gonna see right through this person, nobody's gonna
Yeah.
fool me. And
Mhm.
but you really, you don't know, because sometimes the phase of your life that you're in, or the
Mhm.
state of how vulnerable you might be, what you're going through, you don't see some things,
Mhm.
you see what your mind and your body is telling you to see in order to
Mhm.
survive.
Well, it's also that people will show you what they want you to see.
Hmm.
People will hide anything else from you, so it's like, you want to be that trusting, you want to be that vulnerable with people, but you also have to realize that, like, and again, that's why I was like, I give what I get, I give what I receive,
Yeah.
and that aspect, because again, it's like, you just have to, again, you're still having to protect yourself in that way.
Yeah.
And just because I've learned certain things doesn't mean, I'm like, ha ha ha, I caught you, or anything like that, because that's not at all the case. But it's just, again, give more awareness, and again, to kind of give more light for the things, and again, so that nobody feels bad for what they didn't see. Again, because we're busy, we're working, we're running around constantly. Again, we don't think that we have to really, babysit again, another adult.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also like, if you think about it, like, when they say, like, oh, how did you not see it? And like, why would you stay with him, or why would you, it's like, okay, but I didn't see my biological father as someone who could be abusive and an alcoholic
Hmm.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So was I supposed to walk away from my biological father at 5 years old?
Yeah. Or even the fact that it's like I looked at it, was like, oh, they have nobody. They have nobody. Like, because at the end of the day, when I realized that nobody was like really reaching out to these individuals, I'm like, well, you know, I was like, well, why not? It's like I remember, and it was interesting because now when I look back, I can remember two of them. I had said, I was like, I was like, I wish I had a friend like you. I wish, and I literally, I kind of said it like a smart ass that I am, but I was like, wow, I was like, I wish I was like, I wish you were a friend like that one, like to me. I wish you were like that to me because you're not like that to me,
Mm,
and they couldn't put two and two together. And then again, another one, like he was was constantly like an ATM. Like everybody was calling, reaching out for money. And I was like, I said, I don't ask you for anything. I was like, I said, this one does this. And it was like relatives, close friends. And I was like, it was interesting for me to make those pointers. And that was like for them to like kind of step up and say, wow, well, you're actually right. But again, they didn't, because again, I guess, when you hold somebody at a pedestal, when you're looking at somebody from a different point of view and a different, light, it's like almost like they can do no wrong,
yeah.
and and that's sadly what happens. I mean, again, I know others that they put other people on higher pedestals, and I was like, where am I?
Yeah.
I was like, where am I? And I realized when I have to ask that question of where am I was like, that's usually a not good, that's really not really good. And
Yeah.
both for both.
Yeah. Moving forward
Mhm.
from your experiences and everything that you've gone through, what's one thing that for anyone listening to this or watching this that might be going through the same experiences that you went through, what's one thing that you can tell them that you wish someone had told you when you were going through what you were going through?
To not be ashamed, um to not be ashamed, again, because I think the shame came more when I had that question of why didn't I see, because again, even like I was, they were like, you have to get out, you have to get out. It's like, okay. And I was still in a lease. They were like, oh, but you can't get out yet because you're still in a lease with, and blah, 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 blah. And it was like, it was more of like to go with, also to kind of go with what you feel like you have to do, not to be afraid. I mean, again, sleeping on a, what is that, mattress topper on the floor, you'll be fine. Material things will come and go. But your life, your health, your everything, that's just temporary. Our time here is temporary. Our time here is currency. And we don't know when that's going to run out. And hopefully it's not at the hands of, someone else.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
You're
And
welcome.
what's one lesson that from all the that experience that you've been through is one that you carry with you and you constantly go back to when you feel like you might be going backwards?
To continue to put into myself, to not put me second, to always make sure that I'm okay. And I feel like if I begin to kind of doubt myself with anybody, being it like friendship, personal relationship, to go ahead and kind of I take that step back and I just kind of reflect on myself, because again, in all different scenarios, I found myself, I was like, I'm not really liking how I'm being treated in this. I'm not really liking how I'm not being appreciated, or I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. So I continue to pour into me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
You're
thank you
welcome.
for being so open and vulnerable and coming on here and sharing your story with everyone. And, the next time you come on, it better be so.
I know. No pressure, right? No pressure.
But thank you so much for coming on. And thank you to all of our listeners and viewers for tuning in to another episode of The Ranya Show. I hope you have a wonderful week.
Thank you, too.